Okay. So let's understand what is Jenkins. Now that we know how the repository works, we are supposed to understand the next step. Okay. So the next biggest problem for a developer is whenever a code is developed by a developer, it has to be tested, right? So every time the developer has to be dependent on an administrator, okay, for them to build the environment. There are two options. Either whenever the code is ready, the developer goes, the admin goes and builds the environment as per the requirement, or do it one time and keep it forever until the developer finishes all his work. Both have some problems. Let's understand what are the problems. In the first case, it is time consuming and it could be a human error. Every time an administrator has to build some 10 or 15 systems, we are prone to human errors. So when the developer is gonna when the developer tests it, okay, they will not know whether the issue is with the issue is because of the code, or is it an infrastructure issue? Okay, this is the typical problem which people keep facing. Okay, as a developer, right? So, what is the other solution? The other solution is, what's the other problem? Keep the setup one time and keep it until the developer finishes. Maybe the developer is using only once in 2 days or 3 days. So what happens to the setup? So every 3 days once is what he's using. He's using only 30% of the the resources. Remaining 70% is wasted. The resources are not used in a very effective way. Okay, that's the biggest problem. These are the two typical problems which it exists from the day one of software development. Okay, how do you get out of it? Not today. I'm talking about software development from day one. In 2005, they invented they created something called Jenkins, which could solve to an extent certain problems. Okay, what is Jenkins doing? The work of Jenkins is to reduce the human error caused by admin person and give the developers the edge of testing their environment whenever they need and instantaneously. So the problem here is I cannot keep it running every time, which is going to be a hardware wastage. Okay, instead of doing that, what we do is we write a set of code, we give the instructions to a person called Jenkins and tell him that if somebody wants to execute a code, okay, if somebody wants to execute their development work, go build the environment, test the code, and give the result. So I'm trying to automate that process. And those process automation is maintained by Jenkins, and we call it as continuous integration and continuous deployment. Where is it used? Whenever you develop a new software, you don't use Jenkins. Once you develop a software, you're supposed to continuously improve it. Improvisation of a software is must. Only then we will have a better software, right? So for example, AWS. Every day they are adding something. They are changing the web portal. How it was 10 years back, today it is not the same way. The portal looks much better. It feels good. But how do you do that? They have to have a backend development team. They need to have a testing tools. They have to have an environment to do that. All these things can be taken care by Jenkins. So you can instruct Jenkins saying that, okay, whenever a developer comes to execute a code, go do this, test the code, and give the result to the end user. So what a Jenkins can do, it can do build, test, deploy, test, and package. Okay, Jenkins doesn't do this on itself. Jenkins is a person who is going to handle the job given to it to perform, build, test, deploy, test, package. But to do build, test, deploy, package, it needs something called plugin. It doesn't have the intelligence. It needs a plugin called JCloud, for example. It needs a plugin called JCloud, which will go spin up virtual machines to test the code. Or it needs a plugin called AWS, EC2, or Elastic Beanstalk, which in turn will trigger the Elastic Beanstalk to create an environment, test the code which is being given to Jenkins, and then return it to the user. So Jenkins, look at Jenkins as a facilitator, okay, between the code, and that is why the diagram, this guy who's you see him, he looks like a facilitator, right? It doesn't seem like he's going to do any hard work there. He's a facilitator, right? So Jenkins is more of a facilitator. It is going to take the code given by the developer. If I have to test the code, I will point it to the environment which I have to do. Okay, makes sense? So as I said, Jenkins does not do these things all alone. So remember the conveyor belt which is there. Does it do the work all alone? No, it is a facilitator. It is just making sure the system keeps moving, but it needs the help of the robotic arms, the other things which is around it, or the people to finish the product. But it is going to be a facilitator saying that when the conveyor belt comes to that position, it is going to inform the robotic arm saying that, hey, we are standing at your location, please do your work. So that's a facilitator's job. Making sure the product or the code runs in a perfect manner as required. To integrate more frequently, detect errors quicker, improve quality, and reduce cost. Coordinate the running of tasks as part of the workflows. Compile, test, package, deploy, script, verify, build VMs. Alternatives to Jenkins is TeamCity or Bamboo. Bamboo is being very widely used now because it is very well integrated with Atlassian, a CI server, which is a continuous integration server. There are recent improvements on Bamboo as well. The terminologies which you need to understand in Jenkins is there is a job. Okay, the job is nothing but the end thing which is executed by Jenkins, where the Jenkins is the owner to do the execution, right? That's a job. Okay, there's something called view. A view is nothing but in Jenkins you have the complete view of what you're doing. There's something called master and a slave. So what happens is I might have 100 jobs running. Each job is take the code from the Git, different codes. Take the code from the Git, build it, test the code, then wait for approval, and then go deploy it in the production. Similar to that, there might be 100 jobs. A single server, Jenkins server, doing that is going to be tough because of the load on that system. Okay. What they have done is they've created something called a master slave. The slaves, there'll be multiple slaves, okay, part of the master. Now these slaves will be assigned roles or jobs by master. Master is still the owner of the job, but the execution happens by the slave. So master is going to track which slave is doing which job, and it'll take all the required information from the slave uh, during the execution and outputs of the job. Make sense? There's something called Workspace. A workspace is nothing but a folder where all your job related details are stored for you to refer back in the future. So the best part of the Jenkins is, if you want to do a build, we call the job also as a build. Okay. If you want to rebuild it, okay, now you have an option to track what and all happened. So what exactly happens here? Let's understand. Jenkins takes the code, builds the environment, tests it. Once the test is successful, it is going to remove that environment, but it is going to save all the outputs of that environment. That is the whole idea. Only then I can reuse efficiently the underlying hardware which I have provided for testing. Make sense? Yeah. So that is the main objective, where I am reusing my hardware and efficiently, and my cost of the company goes down and my production increases. So work area, workspace is going to save all the outputs which I have generated during the job, as me as a Jenkins. And plugins are user-defined collection of jobs or workflows, where I say Jenkins is not going to do all its job all alone. It needs special hands, like your robotic arms, which are called the plugins, which are actually integrated to the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt will say, hey, I'm standing at your location, do your work. To do that, I need to integrate that conveyor belt to that robotic arm, right? So this is how a master slave looks like in Jenkins, right? This is a view of the Jenkins. Okay, so if it the green color means it was successful, yellow means it was partially successful or something happened, and there are other things. Okay, you can run a Maven job or Ant or something like that. Custom views, plugins. There are some plugins called Subversion. Subversion is another um, uh, versioning tool like Git and GitHub. Sonar, copy artifacts. Copy artifacts for build completed builds. So I can either push an artifacts, because the outputs of those things, into a workspace, or I can say push it to a Git, or I can also say push it to an S3. I can store all the outputs in the S3. Okay, make sense? Apart from that, I can do a workflow with setup, build workflows, JClouds, provisions, environments.